Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be looking at Tesla's big reveal,
Oh, yeah.
the Cybercab robotaxi.
This is a big one.
I mean, this thing is generating a ton of buzz.
For good reason.
And for good reason.
Hmm.
Whether you're, fascinated by self-driving tech, or you're an investor keeping an eye on Tesla, or you just, love getting a glimpse of what the future might hold.
I mean, who doesn't love that?
Right. This deep dive is for you. So let's dive in.
Let's do it.
So what really I think is so captivating about this announcement is that Tesla isn't just, aiming to release another electric car, right? They're talking about completely changing the way we get around cities.
Yeah, I mean, this is really their attempt to make a splash in the robotaxi market, which has kind of been dominated by other companies like Waymo.
Right, and they definitely know how to make an entrance.
Right.
They didn't just unveil the Cybercab.
Right.
They also surprised everyone with that 20-passenger robo-van.
Yeah, what was it? Oh,
It's like they're just pulling ideas straight out of science fiction.
absolutely. I mean, it's a bold vision for sure.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider Elon Musk's claims that these cybercabs will be surprisingly affordable. I mean, he's saying under $30,000
Wow.
with operating costs as low as like 40 cents a mile.
I mean, I have to admit the idea of calling up a sleek driverless cab to zip me through traffic
Right.
does sound pretty appealing.
Sounds pretty great.
But maybe I'm just being a little too cautious here, but didn't Musk make a similar promise about a robotaxi fleet back in 2019? And I mean, we're still waiting on that one.
That's a fair point, and that's going to be a theme that we return to a lot as we
Yeah.
look at this. Tesla has a history of setting ambitious timelines.
Yeah.
Achieving them is a whole other story.
Right.
But it's worth noting that there's already some skepticism brewing in the financial world.
Yeah.
Immediately after the We robot event, Tesla stock took a 7.5% hit, wiping out $40 billion in value.
Wow. That's a pretty significant drop.
It is.
What do you think that says about investor confidence in this project?
Yeah.
Is it just a case of, Wall Street overreacting, or are there genuine concerns?
I think it's probably a mix of both. I mean, you always have to factor in that Wall Street tends to overreact to these kind of things.
Right.
But some analysts have criticized the event for lacking concrete details,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to, how the Cybercab is going to actually reach profitability.
Yeah.
And then it does make you wonder, those declining sales figures for Tesla's EVs.
Right.
A 9% dip in the US and 5% globally.
Yeah.
That might be adding some pressure, to drum up excitement for this new venture.
Okay, so maybe some investors are hitting the brakes for now, but what about the tech itself? One thing that sets Tesla apart is their approach to autonomous driving.
Yeah.
They're going all in on cameras and AI, while companies like Waymo and Cruise are using a combination of LiDAR, radar, and highly detailed maps.
Yeah, it's a very different approach, and it's one that I think has raised some eyebrows in the industry. The question is, can their camera-only system really match the level of detail and redundancy that other companies are aiming for?
Yeah, especially when you consider that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has been taking a closer look at Tesla's full self-driving system after a number of crashes.
Right. I mean, that's a concern.
Yeah.
That's something that I think regulators are really keeping a close eye on. And,
Yeah.
Tesla's going to have to prove that they can do this safely.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's this whole inductive charging system, which just sounds so futuristic.
Yeah.
Wireless plug-free charging. I mean, who wouldn't want that? Sign me up.
Right.
It sounds appealing, but it also presents some challenges.
Okay.
Think about it. This technology is going to require a whole new infrastructure. Wireless charging stations will need to be installed throughout cities.
Yeah.
And those costs are going to add up quickly.
Right.
Not to mention the technical hurdles that still need to be overcome to make this system reliable and efficient. So it's not quite as simple as just plugging in your phone.
Yeah, not quite.
We'll have to wait and see if those wireless charging stations actually materialize.
Yeah.
And if people are willing to adopt the technology.
I mean, is it going to be as convenient as Tesla says it is?
Right. But speaking of costs, what about owning one of these cybercabs?
Yeah.
Musk claims they'll be under $30,000.
Right.
But is that the whole story?
That's a great question, and it's one that I think a lot of potential buyers are going to be asking.
Yeah.
That sticker price is certainly eye-catching, but when you factor in, those potential costs of inductive charging infrastructure, plus the uncertainty surrounding insurance for a fully autonomous vehicle,
Yeah.
the affordability picture starts to get a bit more complex.
Insurance, the joy of every car owner.
Every car owner's favorite topic.
I can only imagine what insuring a driverless car is going to be like.
Yeah, that's where things could get really interesting.
So let's dive into that next.
Okay, let's do it.
Especially because insurance for Teslas is already known to be higher than average.
Oh, absolutely.
We know that the average annual insurance cost for a Tesla Model 3 is about $2,221.
Wow. Wow.
Which is significantly higher than the industry average of $7,776.
That's a big difference.
And that's for a car with a human driver.
Right?
So imagine what happens when you take the driver out of the equation.
Yeah, that's the big unknown.
Right.
Insurance companies are still trying to figure out how to assess the risks of driverless cars.
Yeah.
So while Musk is highlighting those low operating costs of the Cybercab,
Right.
those potential insurance premiums could easily wipe out any savings you might get on fuel.
Exactly. And, I was reading an article about how some experts are even predicting that insurance for driverless cars could end up being a subscription service.
Oh, wow.
Like you pay a monthly fee to access the autonomous features.
Interesting.
So that adds another layer of complexity to the whole cost equation.
Absolutely. And it's something that potential buyers will definitely need to consider. But let's not forget,
Okay.
owning a Cybercab might not be as expensive as you think.
Okay.
There are some potential tax breaks
Oh.
that could make it more affordable, especially if you're planning to use it for business.
Okay, now this is where things could get interesting for our listeners.
Yeah.
Let's dive into the world of taxes and see what kind of savings might be on the table.
Let's do it. One of the big potential perks for Cybercab owners, especially those who plan to use it for business, is Section 179 of the U.S. Tax Code. This allows businesses to deduct the full purchase price of qualifying vehicles.
So if you're thinking about using your Cybercab for ride-hailing or adding it to a fleet, you might be able to write off that $30,000 price tag.
Exactly.
That's a pretty sweet deal.
It is.
But I'm guessing there are a few caveats. The IRS loves its fine print.
You got it. If you're planning to use the Cybercab for both personal and business use, you'll need to keep meticulous records of your mileage and expenses.
Okay.
Receipts, logs, the whole 9 yards.
So basically stay organized and keep everything documented.
Exactly.
Makes sense. But what about those EV tax credits everyone's always talking about? Those could sweeten the pot even more, right?
Absolutely. Right now, you could potentially qualify for up to $7,500 in federal tax credits.
Wow.
Which would make the Cybercab even more tempting. But there are some catches, of course.
Always right.
These credits are subject to income limitations, so not everyone will qualify for the full amount.
Right. And just to add another layer of complexity, remember that tax policies are constantly changing.
Oh, yeah.
We might see new local fees or per-mile taxes specifically for autonomous vehicles down the line as governments try to find ways to replace the revenue they're losing from fuel taxes.
That's a really important point. The tax landscape for the Cybercab could shift significantly over time, so it's essential to stay informed and adapt as those policies evolve.
Okay.
But let's move beyond taxes
and
consider another potential roadblock for the Cybercab regulations. Getting a self-driving car on the road isn't as simple as just building it. There are layers of regulations and approvals to navigate.
Right. It's not like Tesla can just flip a switch and suddenly have these driverless cabs cruising around our cities. There's a lot more to it than that.
Exactly. James Bohr, director of the Bohr's Group, summed it up pretty well when he said, "There's no regulatory framework in most countries to support its use, which means claiming they'll be on the roads in a year is ambitious at the least."
That's a pretty blunt assessment. So where does Tesla stand right now in terms of regulatory approvals?
Currently, Tesla only has permits to test autonomous vehicles with human drivers behind the wheel. They haven't even applied for the higher-level permits that would be needed to operate driverless cars without any human supervision.
So it sounds like they have quite a bit of ground to cover on the regulatory front. And on top of that, you have different states with varying levels of progress when it comes to autonomous vehicle regulations. California, for example, is much further along than many other states. It's a real patchwork of rules and requirements.
It's definitely a complex landscape to navigate, and it raises the question, is Tesla being overly optimistic about their timeline, or are they banking on the regulations catching up to their technology?
I guess time will tell on that one. But for now, let's shift gears for a moment and think about what might happen if Tesla does manage to clear all these hurdles. What could a world filled with cybercabs look like?
That's where things start to get really fascinating. We're talking about a potential paradigm shift in urban transportation. Imagine cities designed around autonomous vehicles with less traffic congestion, fewer parking lots taking up valuable space, and more room for green spaces and pedestrian areas.
It's like hitting the reset button on urban planning. But it's not just about aesthetics and convenience, right? There's some pretty significant economic and societal implications to consider as well.
Absolutely. Think about the impact on the real estate market. If people no longer need to live close to their workplaces because they can work or relax during their autonomous commute, we might see a shift towards more affordable housing options further away from city centers.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
And what about the potential impact on jobs? The trucking industry alone employs millions of people. If autonomous vehicles become the norm for long-haul trucking, that could have a massive ripple effect on the job market.
That's a crucial question that we need to be thinking about right now. The transition to an autonomous future is unlikely to be smooth or immediate, but it's crucial to start planning for potential job displacement and to create new opportunities for those whose livelihoods might be affected. Perhaps we'll see a rise in demand for skilled technicians who can maintain and repair these complex vehicles, or for specialists in autonomous vehicle logistics and operations.
It's almost like we're on the verge of a technological revolution, but we're not quite sure what the landscape on the other side will look like. It's exciting, but also a little daunting.
I agree. It's an era of immense possibilities, but also potential challenges. And it's important to approach these advancements with a balance of enthusiasm and a healthy dose of critical thinking.
So how can we, as individuals, apply critical thinking to this whole cybercab situation? What are some key takeaways for our listeners? Yeah, it can be easy to get caught up in all the excitement of a flashy new technology like this.
Absolutely.
But it's important to take a step back, I think, and think critically about what this all means.
Yeah, I completely agree. We need to look beyond the marketing and the hype and really dig into the details, What are the actual capabilities of this technology?
Right.
What are the potential risks and downsides? And, how might it actually impact our life in ways that we haven't even considered yet?
So where do we even begin with a task like that?
Well, I think a good place to start is by asking questions. Don't just accept everything that you hear at face value.
Right.
Challenge those assumptions. Look for independent sources of information and analysis. And I think be wary of anyone who claims to have all the answers. This is a rapidly evolving field, and there's still a lot of uncertainty.
So basically, stay curious and informed. That seems like pretty solid advice for navigating just about any new technology, not just self-driving cars.
Absolutely.
But let's bring it back to the Cybercab. What are some specific questions that we should be asking?
Well, for starters, think about the infrastructure that's needed to support a fleet of robotaxis.
Yeah.
Are our cities actually prepared for the widespread adoption of autonomous vehicles?
Right.
Do we have the charging infrastructure in place? What about the data networks and cybersecurity measures that are needed to ensure, safe and reliable operation?
Right.
I mean, these are all really critical considerations that I think go beyond the technology itself.
Right. It's not just about building a cool car. It's about building a whole ecosystem to support it.
Exactly.
And speaking of support, what about that potential impact on jobs?
Yeah.
We touched on this a bit earlier. Right. But it's worth, I think, exploring a little further.
Absolutely. I mean, the shift towards autonomous vehicles could displace millions of workers in the transportation sector, from truck drivers to taxi drivers to delivery drivers. It's crucial that we start thinking about retraining programs and, creating new opportunities for these workers.
Right.
We need to be proactive, not reactive.
So this isn't just a technological disruption.
Right.
It's a potential societal disruption as well.
Absolutely.
We need to be prepared for the ripple effects that this technology could have on our workforce and our economy.
Exactly. And it's not just about jobs. I mean, think about the potential impact on our cities and our communities as well.
Yeah.
Will autonomous vehicles lead to more sprawl as people are able to live further from their workplaces? Will they actually make our streets safer, or could they potentially make them more dangerous?
Great.
How will they affect our access to transportation, especially for people who can't afford to own a car?
Right.
I mean, these are all really complex questions that we need to grapple with as a society.
It's a lot to take in, isn't it?
It is.
This whole Cybercab reveal has really opened up a Pandora's box of questions and possibilities.
It certainly has. And, while we don't have all the answers yet, I think the most important thing is to just keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
We need to, engage in these open and honest discussions about the potential benefits and risks of this technology. We need to involve policymakers, industry leaders, and the public in shaping the future of transportation.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, What's the key takeaway for our listeners?
Okay.
What should they be thinking about as they process all this information?
I think the most important thing is to stay informed, stay curious, and don't be afraid to ask those tough questions.
Yeah.
The future of transportation is being shaped right now, and we all have a role to play in ensuring that it's a future that benefits everyone.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Tesla's Cybercab. It's been quite a journey, and we hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.